Have you ever loved someone so much that you let them slowly erase you? Have you ever given everything, your time, your money, your very soul, to a family that treated you like an employee they forgot to pay? Have you ever sat in a room full of people who share your blood and realized, with a clarity that feels almost violent, that you are the only one in the room who actually cares? And here is the question that kept me awake for 3 months straight, staring at my bedroom ceiling at 3 in the morning, while the Portland rain tapped against the glass like fingers demanding entry. How much is a grandmother's love worth? Is it worth $50 an hour? Is it worth the cost of a babysitter? Is it worth nothing at all until someone decides to invoice you for it? Is it worth your dignity, your self-respect, your very identity? Before you answer, before you scroll past or click away or tell yourself this could never happen to you, I need you to sit with me for a moment. I need you to understand that this is not just a story about money. This is not some petty family squabble over a dinner bill or a borrowed lawn mower. This is a story about dignity, about boundaries, about what happens when you finally stop being the convenient option and start being the person who says, with a voice that does not shake, enough. My name is Elena. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years working for the United States Postal Service in Portland, Oregon, sorting mail through ice storms and heat waves and management changes that would have broken a lesser person. I raised my son James alone after his father passed when James was just 11 years old. I sacrificed. I saved. I showed up. I was there for every skinned knee, every science fair, every heartbreak, every triumph. And I thought, I truly, deeply, unconditionally believed that the love between a mother and her child, between a grandmother and her grandchildren, was the one thing in this world that could never be commodified, the one thing that existed outside the realm of transaction and tally sheets. I was wrong. And what I did next, it changed everything. It changed my relationship with my son. It changed my relationship with myself. It changed the way I understand love, family, and the quiet, devastating power of walking away. If you have ever felt taken for granted by the people you love most, if you have ever wondered whether walking away is an act of cruelty or an act of the deepest self-respect, if you have ever sat alone in your kitchen wondering where you went wrong and why no one seems to notice everything you do, then this story is for you. Do not click away. Do not skip ahead. Do not tell yourself you have heard this before. Because by the end of this, you are going to ask yourself a question you have never asked before, not in the quiet of your own heart, not in the dark of your own bedroom. What price would make you walk away from your own family? What would it take? A fee schedule, a cold demand, a public humiliation, or would you keep giving, keep bending, keep breaking until there was nothing left of you but resentment and regret? Let us begin. Part 1, the paper that changed everything. The smell of roasted turkey should have made my kitchen feel like home. Instead, on that grey Thanksgiving afternoon in Portland, it felt like a funeral, like the end of something I had not even realized was dying. I stood at the counter, wiping the same spot on the granite for the 3rd time, watching my daughter-in-law Vanessa slide a single sheet of cream-colored paper across the oak dining table. The motion was deliberate, practiced, the kind of gesture you make when you have rehearsed it in front of a mirror, when you have run through the conversation in your head a dozen times, when you are absolutely certain that you hold all the power and the person across from you holds none. "What is this?" I asked, setting down the dish towel. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow, like I was speaking from the bottom of a well, like the words were traveling through water before they reached the air. Vanessa adjusted her cardigan. She did not flinch, she did not hesitate, she did not look away. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "It is a fee schedule, Elena." A fee schedule. Let those words sink in for a moment. Really sink in, not a Christmas list, not a request for help, not a conversation about boundaries or schedules or needs or the challenges of modern parenting. A fee schedule, a document, a business arrangement, a contractual obligation. "If you want to see Oliver and Sophie on weekends," she continued, her voice carrying that particular brand of casual cruelty that only comes from people who have never been told no, people who have mistaken their own entitlement for intelligence, "it is $50 an hour. Our time is valuable. Managing guest visits disrupts our routine. The children need structure, and frankly, your unscheduled drop-ins have become a logistical issue that we need to address formally." Guest visits, a logistical issue. Unscheduled drop-ins. She was talking about me, their grandmother, the woman who had been there when Oliver took his first steps in this very living room, The woman who had rocked Sophie through countless fevers while Vanessa needed her space and James had to work late. The woman who had spent every Tuesday for the past 3 years driving Oliver to soccer practice and every Thursday picking Sophie up from preschool so Vanessa could focus on her freelance graphic design business. As if I were a door-to-door salesman who kept showing up unannounced, as if I were a nuisance, a problem to be managed, a variable in her carefully constructed equation of convenience. I turned to my son James, who I had carried through pneumonia at 3 years old, sitting up with him all night while his fever raged at 104 degrees, pressing cool washcloths to his forehead and whispering that everything would be okay. James, whose college application essays I had stayed up until 2 a.m. proofreading while working double shifts at the post office, my eyes burning with exhaustion but my heart full of hope. James, who I had helped move into his first apartment, who I had supported through his wedding, who I had stood beside on the happiest day of his life, and genuinely believed that I was gaining a daughter, not a landlord. James, who was now staring fixedly into his coffee mug, as if the secrets of the universe were hidden in the depths of his lukewarm pumpkin spice latte, as if the ceramic could protect him from the weight of his mother's gaze. James, I said, just his name, just one word. It was all I could manage. It was a question, a plea, a prayer, and a challenge all wrapped into 2 syllables. He looked up, but he did not meet my eyes. His gaze settled somewhere on my left shoulder, avoiding the direct connection that had once been the bedrock of our relationship. Child care costs are rising, Mom. Vanessa is just managing the household budget. You know how expensive Portland has gotten. We are trying to be practical about our resources. Practical? I was a retired postal supervisor. I knew the math of desperation. I had spent 3 decades sorting mail, managing routes, balancing budgets so tight they squeaked, stretching paychecks until they begged for mercy. I understood what it meant to look at a ledger and see more red than black. I understood the panic of rising costs and stagnant wages, and the impossible arithmetic of modern life. But this was not practicality. This was not budgeting. This was not 2 overwhelmed parents trying to make ends meet. This was leverage. This was power. This was a woman who had looked at the unconditional love of a grandmother and seen an untapped revenue stream. You are asking me, I said slowly, keeping my voice flat and steady because I knew that if I let even a crack of emotion show, if I let the trembling that was building in my chest reach my throat, I would shatter into a million pieces right there on my own kitchen floor, to pay to be a grandmother. Vanessa nodded, unbothered, unmoved, completely, terrifyingly serene, as if I had just confirmed the time of day or agreed on the weather, as if she had expected this reaction, had planned for it, had already calculated her next 3 moves. Pay me, she said, each word sharp and distinct as a hammer on stone, or you do not see them. That is the boundary. The words hung in the warm kitchen air, cold and definitive as a judge's gavel. The turkey continued to roast in the oven, its savoury aroma now mocking in its domesticity. The rain tapped against the windows. The refrigerator hummed its familiar song, and my world tilted on an axis I had not even known was fragile. I want you to imagine that moment. I want you to put yourself in my shoes, standing in the kitchen where you have cooked 1,000 meals, where you have bandaged 100 scraped knees, where you have celebrated birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesdays that felt like gifts simply because your family was there. The air smells like sage and butter, and the cranberry sauce you made from scratch, because Vanessa once mentioned casually that she liked it better than canned. You have spent the entire morning preparing a feast for a family that has just informed you, with the casual indifference of a utility company, that your presence is a billable service. What do you do? Do you scream? Do you throw the turkey across the room? Do you grab the fee schedule and tear it into 1,000 pieces? Do you cry? Do you beg? Do you fall to your knees and promise to pay whatever they ask, whatever the cost, because the thought of not seeing your grandchildren is a pain worse than any price tag? I did none of those things. I carefully folded the paper along its creases, my fingers moving with the mechanical precision I had learned from 30 years of handling mail. I placed it in the pocket of my apron, and I walked to the front door, holding it open with a hand that did not tremble, a hand that had learned steadiness through decades of necessity. Happy Thanksgiving, I said quietly. The words tasted like ash. James looked up then. For just a fraction of a second I saw something flash across his face, guilt maybe, or shame, or perhaps just the dim, dawning realization that he had allowed his wife to turn his mother into a line item on a spreadsheet, that he had traded his backbone for a quiet life, that he had chosen the path of least resistance and found it led directly to his mother's broken heart. But the moment passed. The guilt was not strong enough to overcome the cowardice. He followed Vanessa out into the crisp November afternoon, and I watched their SUV pull away from the curb until it disappeared around the corner, taking with it the last illusion I had about the family I thought I knew. I went back inside, I turned off the oven, I walked to my desk. And I did not cry. Not then, not yet. The tears would come later in the dark hours of the night when the house was too quiet and the silence was too loud. But in that moment I had something more important to do than grieve. I pulled out my calendar, the same calendar where I had carefully written every upcoming playdate, every birthday dinner, every weekend visit, every soccer practice I was supposed to drive Oliver to, every preschool pickup for Sophie that Vanessa had graciously allowed me to handle. I took a black marker and I crossed out every single one. January 15, Oliver's birthday dinner, gone. February 3, weekend visit, gone. February 14, Valentine's Day cookie baking with Sophie, gone. Every Tuesday soccer practice, gone. Every Thursday afternoon babysitting shift, gone. Every quick favor and just this once, and I know it is short notice, but gone, gone, gone. My calendar, which had been so full of color and purpose and the joyful chaos of family life, was suddenly, starkly, terrifyingly, completely blank. And in that terrifying, liberating emptiness, I made a decision that would reshape the next 3 months of my life, my son's life, the life of a woman who thought she could put a price on love, and most importantly, my own life. I would not call them. I would not beg. I would not negotiate. I would not explain, I would not justify, I would not apologize for choosing myself. I would simply stop. Part 2, the silence that screamed. The first week was the hardest. Not because they called, they did not call, not once. Not a single text message pinged my phone, not a single voicemail filled my inbox, not a single email arrived in my account. It was as if my absence was not even a blip on their radar. As if the woman who had been the invisible scaffolding of their daily lives had simply vanished into thin air, and the building had not even noticed the missing support beam. And that, if I am being completely honest with you, hurt more than the fee schedule itself, more than the invoice, more than the cold, calculated cruelty of Vanessa's demand. The indifference, the assumption, the absolute unshakable certainty that I would eventually cave, that I would pay the toll, that I would come crawling back with my wallet open and my dignity in my pocket, because what grandmother could possibly stay away from her grandchildren? What mother could possibly hold a grudge against her own son? What woman in her 60s could possibly survive without the validation of being needed? But I am not just a grandmother, I am not just a mother, I am not just a convenient solution to someone else's scheduling problem. I am Elena. I'm a woman who raised a child alone while working full-time in a job that did not care about my personal struggles. I'm a woman who sorted mail through ice storms that shut down the city and heat waves that melted the asphalt. I am a woman who survived management changes and budget cuts and the slow, grinding erosion of a career that asked everything and gave little back. I am a woman who knows how to endure. Who knows how to wake up every morning and do what needs to be done, regardless of how she feels inside. So I endured. On Tuesday afternoon, the same Tuesday when I would normally have driven 8-year-old Oliver to his soccer practice, while Vanessa ran errands that somehow always ended at the spa, the boutique, or the coffee shop with her laptop open to a client project, I put on my walking shoes and I went to the local community centre. I had passed that building 1,000 times over the years. I had always meant to go inside. I had always told myself next week, next month, when things calm down, when the kids are older, when Vanessa does not need me as much. But there was always a practice to drive to, a meal to prepare, a child to watch, a favor to do, a crisis to manage, a need to fill. Now, for the first time in what felt like decades, I had nothing but time. The community centre was warm and bustling, filled with the sounds of children in after-school programs, the smell of coffee from the small cafe, the energy of people engaged in activities that had nothing to do with my family and everything to do with their own lives. I walked to the front desk, and asked about volunteer opportunities. The coordinator, a young man named David with kind eyes and paint-stained fingers and a genuine smile that made me feel seen in a way I had not realized I needed, explained that they had several programs. "We mostly get college students," he said, almost apologetically. "The book restoration program at the public library is not very glamorous work. A lot of gluing, sorting, cataloguing, very meticulous, very detail-oriented." "Glamorous," I told him, feeling a small, unfamiliar smile tug at the corner of my mouth, "is vastly overrated. I have 30 years of experience in meticulous organizational systems, and I am available immediately and indefinitely." His eyes lit up. "Then we are very lucky to have you, Elena." By Thursday I had a rhythm, I had purpose. I had something that belonged entirely to me, my time, my skills, my presence. No one was billing me for it. No one was taking it for granted. It was simply mine. And then my phone buzzed. It was James. A brief text, almost casual in its assumption, as if 3 weeks of silence had been a minor inconvenience rather than a seismic shift. "Hey Mom, are you coming over to watch Sophie after preschool today? Vanessa has a client meeting and the sitter cancelled last minute. We really need you." I looked at that message for a long time. I read it 3 times. I studied the words, "we really need you," and felt the old instinct rise up in my chest, the urge to drop everything, to rush over, to be the solution, to be needed, to be useful, to be valuable. Then I set the phone on my nightstand, I turned off the ringer, and I went to make myself a cup of tea. An hour later it rang. I let it go to voicemail. 2 hours after that an email arrived. It was from Vanessa. The subject line read, "Invoice for missed session, late cancellation fee applied." I opened it. There, in the same precise formatting she had used for the Thanksgiving fee schedule, was a digital invoice for the missed babysitting session, plus a $25 late cancellation fee, plus a note about repeated failure to honor scheduled commitments. I read it calmly. I felt nothing but a distant, almost anthropological curiosity about the mind of a person who could send an invoice for love. I archived it into a new folder I created in my email, labeled simply, "Family Business." And I did not reply. Not with anger, not with sarcasm, not with the 1,000 cutting remarks that bubbled up in my throat like acid. I simply said nothing, because sometimes the most powerful word in the English language is silence. Sometimes the most devastating response is the absence of one. Part 3, The Unraveling. Here is something I need you to understand about the modern family dynamic, especially for those of you watching this who might be in a similar situation right now, who might be the invisible backbone of a family that has forgotten to say thank you. Invisible labor is only invisible until it disappears. For years, I had been the silent engine of Vanessa and James's household. I was not just the babysitter. I was not just the occasional helper. I was the infrastructure. I was the foundation they had built their comfortable life on top of without ever acknowledging the architecture. I was the grocery runner who bought organic produce in bulk and stocked their pantry without being asked, who knew exactly what brand of almond milk Sophie preferred and what kind of protein bars James liked for his work lunches. I was the personal shopper who spent hundreds of dollars every season on winter coats and snow boots and school supplies, who kept track of growth spurts and changing sizes and the endless, expensive cycle of children's clothing. I was the financier who prepaid Sophie's private preschool fees and Oliver's swimming lessons directly from my own account, who handled the seasonal clothes shopping and the classroom party supplies and the birthday gifts for their friends. I never made a scene about it. I never kept a ledger. I never reminded them of everything I did, never threw it in their faces during arguments, never used it as leverage or guilt. I did it because I loved them, because that is what family does, because I genuinely, wholeheartedly believed that my generosity was building something, memories, bonds, a foundation of love that would outlast any temporary inconvenience, any financial strain, any rough patch. I was wrong about that too, because when I stopped showing up, the cracks did not appear gradually. They did not slowly spread over months or years. They appeared immediately, violently, like a dam that had been held together by a single thread, and that thread had just been cut, and now the water was roaring through with the force of everything that had been held back. The first thing I did was call the local recreation centre and cancel the auto-renewal on Oliver's private swimming instruction. It was billed to my card. I had set it up 2 years ago when James mentioned, casually over Sunday dinner, that they could not afford the premium tier, and Oliver would have to drop down to the basic group lessons. I had gone home that night, called the centre, and upgraded him. I had never told them I was paying for it, I just did it. Because that is what grandmothers do. Because seeing Oliver's face light up when he talked about his coach and his progress, and his goal of making the junior team was worth more than the monthly charge. Except now I was not a grandmother. I was a retired woman auditing her personal budget. I was a business entity re-evaluating her investments. I was someone who had been told, in no uncertain terms, that her presence had a price, and I had decided that the price of my absence was one they needed to feel. Then I stopped the weekly pantry boxes, the organic produce, the snacks, the bulk items I would drop off every Sunday like a silent Santa Claus, unloading them from my trunk while Vanessa stayed inside working and James watched football. I stopped the seasonal clothes shopping. I stopped the prepaid activities. I stopped every invisible thread of support that had been weaving their comfortable life together, thread by thread, until the tapestry began to unravel. On Friday afternoon, James called my landline from his office. I could hear the nervous edge in his voice immediately, the same edge he used to get as a child when he had broken something and was trying to figure out how to tell me before I found out on my own. "Mom," he said, "the swim instructor turned Oliver away today. He said the payment did not go through, that the account was closed. Did you cancel something?" I leaned against my kitchen counter, looking out at the rain-soaked Portland streets, watching the drops race each other down the glass. "I have restructured my monthly expenditures, James." A long pause. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, my voice even and calm, the voice of a woman who had made her decision and would not be moved, "that since family interactions are now formal transactions, I am auditing my personal budget. If my time has a price, then so does my money, and I have decided that the return on investment is no longer satisfactory. I am reallocating my resources." "Mom," Vanessa was just trying to establish structure. "You do not have to take it so literally. It was not personal." "Structure," I replied, "applies to everyone involved, not just one side. If we are running this like a business, then we run it like a business. And in business, when a service provider raises their rates beyond what the market will bear, the client finds alternative solutions. I am exploring my alternatives." He tried to argue. He used words like misunderstanding and overreaction, and "you are being dramatic, and this is not like you." I let him talk. I let him exhaust every excuse, every rationalization, every attempt to minimize what had been done. And then I told him I had an appointment and needed to clear the line. After hanging up, I walked down to my basement. I pulled out old gardening supplies that had been gathering dust for 6 years, pushed into a corner behind boxes of Christmas decorations and old photo albums. For 6 years I had put off planting a winter greenhouse bed because I was always on call for babysitting duties. For 6 years I had told myself, next season, next year, when things calm down, when the kids are older, when Vanessa does not need me as much. Things never calmed down. I just stopped waiting for a calm that was never going to arrive. I spent the rest of that afternoon turning soil, preparing seed beds, filling my schedule with tasks that belonged entirely to me. My hands ached. My back protested. Dirt found its way under my fingernails and into the creases of my palms. And for the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt something I had almost forgotten existed. I felt like myself, not James's mother, not Oliver and Sophie's grandmother, not Vanessa's unpaid assistant. Just Elena. Part 4: The Ripple Effect. December arrived with the first real snow of the Portland winter, blanketing the city in a silence that felt almost sacred. The kind of silence that makes you believe, if only for a moment, that the world has paused to let you catch your breath. Historically, December was my marathon month, my Olympic event. I would spend hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars on gifts, coats, boots, classroom party supplies, and baking materials. I would spend entire weekends decorating cookies with Oliver and Sophie, wrapping presents with the careful precision of a postal worker, preparing their favorite meals until my kitchen looked like a holiday bomb had exploded in the best possible way. I would exhaust myself to the point of collapse, surviving on 4 hours of sleep and pure adrenaline, and I would do it with a smile because their joy was my joy. Their excitement was my fuel. Their laughter was the only payment I ever needed. This year I bought only what I needed for my small home: a new pair of warm gloves, some ice melt for the driveway, a bag of seed starter for the greenhouse, a watercolor set I had been eyeing for months. That was it. During a visit to the local hardware store, I ran into one of James's co-workers, a young man named Eric who I had met once at a company barbecue 2 summers ago. We exchanged pleasantries, and then casually, almost as an afterthought, he mentioned, James has been looking really tired at work lately, taking a lot of personal calls in the hallway, something about morning drop-off logistics. He missed a deadline last week. The boss is not happy. I smiled politely. I bought my ice melt, I paid cash. In the past, I would have rushed home, called Vanessa, offered to take over the morning routine indefinitely, brought them a hot meal, taken the blame somehow just to keep the peace. I would have absorbed their stress like a sponge, adding it to my own burden because that was my role. That was my function. That was what I had been trained to do. Now, I packed my groceries into the trunk, drove home, and spent the evening reading in my quiet living room with a cup of chamomile tea and the sound of rain against the windows, and the knowledge that their chaos was no longer my responsibility. The absence of my presence was casting ripples through their daily schedule, ripples that were rapidly becoming waves, waves that were becoming a flood. Vanessa's freelance graphic design business required quiet morning hours, hours that used to be covered by my early arrival at their house with breakfast for the children. With lunches packed, with backpacks ready, with Sophie dressed in her favorite purple leggings and Oliver's homework checked and signed. Without my uncredited labor, their carefully balanced routine was fracturing under its own weight, collapsing like a house of cards that had been held up by a single, invisible hand. I did not celebrate this. I did not take satisfaction in it. I did not sit in my greenhouse cackling like a villain in a storybook, but I did not rush to fix it either. Because here is the truth that took me weeks to accept, that I need you to hear if you are still listening. You cannot save people from the consequences of their own choices, and trying to do so only robs them of the lesson they desperately need to learn. Later that week, I received a printed letter in the mail. The envelope was thick, expensive stationery, the kind Vanessa used for her professional correspondence. The letter inside was formatted with the precision of a legal document, complete with headers and bullet points and a signature line. It was a formal reminder notice. She was reducing the hourly visit fee by 10% as a holiday courtesy. She wrote that the children missed me. She wrote that I was being overly rigid over a simple administrative misunderstanding. She wrote that she regretted any emotional distress, but maintained that clear boundaries benefit all parties. The tone was condescending, framed as though she were granting me a charitable discount to see my own flesh and blood, as though she were a benevolent landlord offering a rent reduction to a struggling tenant. I held that paper up to the kitchen light, studying the precise margins, the professional font, the careful language. It was clear that Vanessa viewed relationships purely as negotiations, and in her mind she still held the high ground. She still believed this was a bargaining table, and she was simply adjusting her opening offer. I did not write back. Instead, I filed the letter in the family business folder, right next to the invoice and the fee schedule. I put on my coat, and I drove to the library, where I had been asked to teach a small class on organizing family archives, a class that was now so popular we had a waiting list, a class filled with people who hung on my every word and thanked me with genuine gratitude at the end of each session. Part 5, The Holiday That Wasn't. Christmas came and went in total silence. No invitations, no family dinners, no chaotic mornings with wrapping paper flying and children squealing with delight, no frantic phone calls asking me to bring the mashed potatoes or pick up the pie or watch the kids while they ran last-minute errands, no expectation, no obligation, no performance. I sent 2 simple, beautiful hardback books directly to Oliver and Sophie through the mail, addressed specifically to them in my own handwriting. No money enclosed, no gift cards for the parents, no elaborate packaging designed to impress Vanessa, just books, just love unencumbered by transaction, unmeasured by cost, unapologized for in its simplicity. On New Year's Eve, I sat in my living room with a glass of sparkling cider, watching the Portland fireworks paint the sky outside my window, and I felt something I had not expected. I felt peace. Not happiness exactly. There was still a hole in my heart where my grandchildren lived, a space that ached in the quiet hours. There was still grief, still anger, still the occasional 3 a.m. moment where I would stare at the ceiling and wonder if I had done the right thing, if I was being too hard, if a better grandmother would have just paid the fee and swallowed her pride, because anything was better than this silence. But underneath all of that, there was a bedrock sense of peace. The peace that comes from knowing you have drawn a line in the sand and you have not crossed it. The peace that comes from choosing yourself, even when it hurts. The peace that comes from finally, after years of being the giver, being the person who says, "My love is not for sale, and my presence is not a service you can cancel and renew at your convenience." At 8:42 p.m. my doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone. My neighbors knew I preferred a quiet evening. My friends were at their own celebrations. The library was closed. The community center was dark. I walked to the door, turned on the porch light and pulled back the curtain. It was James. Alone. Snow was clinging to his jacket's shoulders, melting into dark patches on the wool. His cheeks were red from the cold. His eyes were tired, shadowed, older than I remembered. He looked smaller somehow, standing on my porch in the yellow glow of the light, like a child who had lost his way home and was not sure he was welcome at the door. I unlocked the door and opened it. "Happy New Year, Mom," he said. His voice was rough, uncertain, stripped of the defensive armor he had worn at Thanksgiving. "Come in," I said. "I will make tea." I kept the conversation civil but strictly distant. We talked about the weather, about his drive over, about the books I had sent the children, safe topics, surface topics, the kind of conversation you have with a coworker you do not particularly like, with a neighbor you wave to but never invite inside. He sat on the edge of my living room sofa, looking around the house as if searching for something that had changed. And perhaps it had. The greenhouse supplies in the corner, pots and soil and seed packets, the watercolor paintings on the wall, my own from the evening class I had started taking at the Community Arts Center, landscapes and still lifes that surprised me with their competence, the library books stacked neatly on the coffee table. The absence of children's toys, of family photos in every frame, of the clutter that used to define my existence. "Vanessa is stressed," he finally admitted, staring into his mug as if it held answers he was afraid to read. "The morning routine is a disaster. We are spending a fortune on last-minute daycare. The babysitter we hired quit after 2 weeks. Said the kids were too much without the usual support system. Said Sophie has meltdowns when her routine changes and Oliver refuses to do his homework without the grandma check we used to have." I took a sip of my tea. "That sounds challenging, James." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the mug cradled in both hands like a prayer. "She is willing to drop the fee entirely, Mom, if you just agree to take the kids 3 afternoons a week again. No charge, no conditions, just, come back, we need you." I looked at my son, really looked at him. I saw the dark circles under his eyes, purple and bruised looking. I saw the way his hands trembled slightly around the mug. I saw the passive habit of a man who had spent years letting his wife dictate terms while he managed the fallout, who had allowed his mother to be disrespected because it was easier than standing up to his partner, who had chosen comfort over courage and was now discovering that comfort has a price too. "I am not a free service you turn on when paid options fail," I said softly. "Nor am I a customer you charge when you want extra cash. I am your mother, I was their grandmother. You allowed a price tag to be put on my presence. You sat at that table and you said nothing. You looked at your coffee and you let her treat me like a vendor." He opened his mouth to defend her, to explain, to rationalize, to say the words I had heard 1,000 times before. She didn't mean it like that, and she was just stressed, and you know how she gets. But no words came, because there were no words. There was no defense for what he had allowed. There was no explanation that could undo the moment when he chose his wife's comfort over his mother's dignity. He left 20 minutes later. His shoulders were slumped against the cold wind as he walked to his car, his breath visible in short, sharp clouds. I locked the door behind him, and I felt that strange, solid sense of peace settle over me again. I had not won. There was no winning in a situation like this, but I had not lost either. I had simply refused to play a game where the rules were designed to make me lose, where the board was tilted and the dice were loaded, and the only move that guaranteed my survival was not to move at all. Part 6: The New Rhythm. By mid-January, my life had established a new, rewarding rhythm completely independent of my son's household. The local library had offered me a part-time paid position, organizing their historical manuscript collection 3 mornings a week. The work was engaging, precise, and surrounded me with people who valued my experience and reliability. People who said, "thank you," and meant it. People who did not send me invoices. People who looked at my 31 years of postal service not as a quaint anecdote, but as a testament to my work ethic, my attention to detail, my ability to show up consistently and do the job right. I reconnected with my old co-worker Patricia, a woman I had worked with at the post office for 15 years before she retired to Arizona. She had recently moved back to Portland to be closer to her own grandchildren whose parents, she told me over lunch one Thursday at a small downtown diner, treated her like visiting royalty rather than hired help. They asked me to come, Patricia said, stirring her coffee with the slow satisfaction of a woman who had earned her peace. They do not demand, they do not invoice. They say, we would love to see you, is this weekend good? And if I say no, they say, no problem, let us know when you are free. That is how it should be, Ellie. That is how family should work. We began meeting every week. We discussed books, local politics, our travel plans for the upcoming spring, a road trip down the Oregon coast that we had been talking about for a decade, but never found time for because there was always a family obligation, always a crisis, always someone who needed us more than we needed ourselves. During one lunch, Patricia mentioned seeing Vanessa at a local bakery, arguing heatedly over the phone with a babysitter who had walked out mid-shift. She looked absolutely frazzled, Patricia said, almost sympathetically. Hair a mess, no makeup, bags under her eyes. The poor girl at the counter was trying to hand her a coffee and Vanessa just snapped at her. I have never seen her like that. She always looked so put together, so in control. I listened without adding gossip or judgment. My emotional investment in Vanessa's domestic friction had evaporated, replaced by a detached curiosity that felt almost like studying a foreign culture. I realized that for years, I had allowed my desire to be helpful to blur the boundaries of my own self-respect. I had confused love with servitude. I had mistaken generosity for obligation. I had believed that the more I gave, the more I proved my worth, when in reality I had been teaching them that my worth was measured only by what I could provide. Now my home was clean, quiet, and entirely mine. The garden beds in my small greenhouse were already sprouting winter greens, kale, spinach, arugula herbs that filled the air with sense of life and growth. My bank account was healthier than it had been in years, no longer drained by invisible subsidies and unacknowledged expenses. I bought a new set of watercolor paints and began taking evening classes at the Arts Center, discovering a talent I had suppressed for decades, because there was always something more important to do, someone more needy to serve. One evening, driving home from class with a half-finished painting of the Portland skyline in the back seat, I passed the turnoff to James's neighborhood. The street that had once been my second home, the route I had driven so many times I could navigate it blindfolded. I did not feel anger. I did not feel longing. I did not feel the pull of old habits and older love. I simply kept driving straight toward my own brightly lit house, enjoying the quiet classical music playing on the car radio, feeling the weight of a day well spent, a life reclaimed. Part 7, The Social Media Gambit. Late January brought a shift in their approach. Since silence and reduced fees had not forced me to negotiate, since I had not come crawling back with my checkbook open and my calendar cleared, Vanessa decided to escalate. She posted a long, thinly veiled status on a local community social media page. It was a masterpiece of manipulation, a symphony of victimhood played on the strings of public sympathy. She wrote about the tragedy of estranged grandparents who abandon their duty to the next generation. She wrote about the pain of explaining to innocent children why someone they loved simply stopped showing up. She wrote about the silence that hurts more than words ever could. Attached to the post was a carefully staged photo of Oliver and Sophie looking sad, framed with a caption about how hard it was to explain to children why family members choose to walk away. The lighting was perfect. The composition was artful. The children's expressions were heartbreakingly genuine because they were genuinely confused, genuinely sad, genuinely wondering where their grandmother had gone. It was a calculated move, a precision strike, designed to publicly shame me into compliance within our small Portland community, designed to paint me as the villain, the cold-hearted grandmother who had abandoned her innocent grandchildren over a simple misunderstanding, designed to turn neighbors, acquaintances, and mutual friends against me before I even knew the battle had begun. A friend from the library showed me the post on her phone during our lunch break. I read it calmly. I felt nothing but a distant, almost anthropological interest in the psychology of someone who would use children as props in a public relations campaign, who would exploit her own children's confusion for social media clout. 10 years ago, such a public attack would have devastated me. It would have sent me running to apologize, to fix things, to take the blame just to make the noise stop, to sacrifice my truth on the altar of public opinion. Instead, I remained calm. I did not comment on the post. I did not engage in any online defense. I did not give Vanessa the satisfaction of a reaction, the drama she was clearly fishing for. When a mutual acquaintance brought it up at the grocery store a few days later, her voice dripping with the particular concern that masks pure gossip, I simply replied, "Private family matters are rarely accurately represented on the internet," and changed the subject to the unseasonably warm weather we had been having. But here is where Vanessa's plan backfired spectacularly. The lack of public drama frustrated her. She had expected me to react. She had expected a fight, a spectacle, a social media war that she could use to confirm her narrative of the crazy, unreasonable mother-in-law who could not handle boundaries. Instead, she got silence, dignified, unshakable, infuriating silence. And then the comments started rolling in. Not the sympathy she had expected, not the outrage at the terrible grandmother. Instead, several local mothers, people who had apparently been watching this drama unfold with the keen interest of neighbors who know more than they let on, began commenting with questions that cut deeper than any accusation I could have made. "If you need help so badly, why not just hire professional care? It sounds like you were charging your mother-in-law to see her own grandkids. Is that accurate? Maybe the estrangement has more to do with treating family like employees than with abandonment. My mother-in-law helps us for free because she loves our kids, just saying." Vanessa deleted the post within hours, but the damage was done. The line had been crossed. She had proven beyond any shadow of a doubt that to her, family was merely a tool for utility and public optics, and the community had seen it. Part 8: The Collapse. The first week of February, the fragile system Vanessa had built completely collapsed. James called me late on a Tuesday evening. I was in my armchair reading a novel when the phone rang. His voice was raw with exhaustion, stripped of the pretense and defensiveness that had characterized our previous conversations. He sounded like a man who had been running for months and had finally hit a wall. "Mom," he said, and I could hear that he was driving, could hear the Bluetooth connection crackling slightly, could hear the stress in every syllable. Vanessa's largest freelance client dropped her, missed deadlines, the chaotic scheduling at home, she could not focus. She lost the account, and Sophie's preschool sent a notice about unpaid afternoon program fees that Vanessa had assumed she could cover using the visitation revenue she had planned to collect from you. She budgeted for it, Mom. She actually put it in the budget." He paused. I could hear him swallow, could hear the wet sound of a man trying not to cry while driving. "She thought you were bluffing, Mom. She thought you loved the kids too much to say no forever. She thought you would break first. She thought you needed us more than we needed you." I sat in my favorite armchair, holding the phone securely, looking out at the dark February night, at the bare branches of the maple tree outside my window. "I do love the kids, James. I love them enough not to teach them that their grandmother can be bought and sold at a gate. I love them enough not to teach them that love is a transaction, that family is a business, that the people who care for you most can be discarded when they stop being convenient and invoiced when they become profitable. I love them enough to show them, by my absence if necessary. That respect is the foundation of every relationship worth having." He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion, with the weight of realizations that had been building for months. "I was a coward, Mom. I let her drive a wedge because I wanted to avoid arguments at home. I thought if I just stayed out of it, if I just let her handle things her way, it would all blow over. I never thought you would actually walk away. I never thought you had it in you. And I think that is what scared me the most, not that you were gone, but that you were strong enough to stay gone. I cannot fix your marriage or your finances, James. You are 35 years old. You have to handle the consequences of the environment you allow in your home. You have to decide what kind of man you want to be, what kind of father, what kind of son. I cannot make that decision for you." He did not ask for money, and I did not offer any. We said goodbye. I hung up the phone, and I sat in the silence of my living room, feeling the weight of 3 months of grief, anger, relief, and hope all settling into something I could finally name. Closure. Not the end, but the end of the beginning. Part 9: The Rain-Soaked Reckoning. It was a rainy Thursday evening in mid-February, exactly 3 months since Thanksgiving, exactly 3 months since a piece of paper had changed everything. I was in the kitchen preparing a light dinner, a simple vegetable soup with greens from my greenhouse, a slice of sourdough bread, a glass of wine, listening to the rain hit the windowpanes in that particular Portland rhythm that sounds like applause, like the city itself is applauding your survival. Suddenly, heavy, frantic pounding rattled my front door. Not a knock, not a polite ring of the bell. Pounding, desperate, angry, terrified pounding that shook the frame and echoed through the hallway. I walked down the hallway, I turned on the porch light, I pulled back the curtain. It was Vanessa. Rain was soaking her hair, plastering it to her face in dark, stringy ropes. Her coat was thrown on hastily, inside out, the designer label showing. Her eyes were wild, red-rimmed, desperate. She looked like a woman who had run out of road, out of options, out of moves. She looked like someone who had finally discovered that the game she thought she was winning had been lost from the start. I unlocked the door and opened it halfway, keeping my hand on the frame, my body positioned to block entry. She did not wait for an invitation. She tried to step inside, but my position held the boundary. My body was a wall and she could not pass. "Elena," she demanded, her voice high-pitched and strained, cracking on my name like ice under pressure. "You need to listen to me. This has gone on long enough. You are ruining our family over a stupid piece of paper. We are drowning and you are sitting here doing nothing. You are being selfish. You are being cruel. You are punishing innocent children because you have some kind of vendetta against me." She held up her phone, pointing at a calendar app with shaking hands, the screen glowing blue in the rainy darkness. "Just take them tomorrow. No fees, no conditions, no paperwork, just take them. Please, I have a client meeting. James has a presentation, we have no one else. The babysitter quit. The after-school program is full. We are desperate." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the desperation underneath her anger. I saw the fear in her eyes. I saw the exhaustion in her posture. But I also saw what was missing. There was no apology. There was no acknowledgement of what she had done. No recognition that she had tried to charge me for the privilege of loving my grandchildren. No understanding that she had used social media to try to destroy my reputation. No comprehension that her fee schedule had been an act of profound disrespect, not just to me, but to the very concept of family, to the unspoken covenant that says love is not conditional and presence is not purchasable. There was only the frustration of a controller who had run out of moves, only the rage of someone who had discovered that their power was an illusion. "Pay me or you do not see them," I quoted softly. I repeated the exact words she had spat at my table 3 months ago, in the same tone, with the same cold precision, with the same absolute certainty. She froze, her breath hitched in the cold air. The rain drummed against the porch roof in a relentless percussion. "You set the terms of our relationship, Vanessa," I said. My voice was steady as bedrock. "You decided that my presence had a price. You decided that love was a transaction. You decided that family was a business. I simply decided that your terms were unacceptable and I opted out. I am not a service provider. I am not an employee. I am not a convenience you can activate when your other options fail." "They are your grandchildren," she shouted, tears finally breaking through her composure, mixing with the rain on her face, her voice cracking into something almost childlike in its desperation. "You are supposed to love them. You are supposed to help. That is what family does. You cannot just walk away from children." "And you are their mother," I replied. "It is your job to care for them, not to contract them out, not to monetize their relationships, not to treat the people who love them as disposable labor to be billed and discarded. You wanted to run this like a business, Vanessa. And in business, when you drive away your most reliable vendor, you do not get to pound on their door in the rain and demand emergency service for free." "Please," she whispered. The anger collapsed into begging, into the raw, ugly sound of pride breaking. I am sorry, okay? Just help us. I cannot do this alone. I cannot do this without you." "I am not your backup plan, Vanessa. I am not your safety net. I am not an employee you can fire and rehire based on your convenience. Do not pound on my door again." I closed the door, smoothly, calmly, without rage, without triumph, without the satisfaction of victory, because there was no victory here. Only survival, only boundaries, only the quiet, devastating power of a woman who had finally learned to say no. I locked it, I turned off the porch light, And I walked back to my kitchen, where my soup was simmering gently and my life was waiting for me. Part 10: The spring that followed. Spring arrived in Portland with blooming cherry trees and warmer winds that carried the scent of rain and renewal and possibility. My greenhouse was thriving, tomato seedlings reaching for the light, pepper plants heavy with promise, herbs I had never had time to grow filling the air with basil and rosemary and thyme. My work at the library had turned into a permanent part-time role that I thoroughly enjoyed, surrounded by colleagues who respected me and work that fulfilled me in ways I had forgotten existed. 2 weeks after the incident on my porch, James came over alone on a Saturday morning. He looked tired but remarkably clear-eyed. He sat at my table not to make demands but to talk, really talk. He informed me that he and Vanessa had entered marriage counseling. He informed me that Vanessa had taken a structured office job to stabilize their income, trading the chaotic freedom of freelancing for the reliability of a paycheck. He informed me that they had fired the revolving door of babysitters and enrolled the children in a reliable after-school program that they were paying for themselves. And most importantly, he acknowledged his own failure, his cowardice, his complicity in allowing his wife to disrespect the woman who had raised him, who had sacrificed for him, who had loved him without condition for 35 years. "I am sorry, Mom," he said. "I am sorry I did not stand up for you. I am sorry I let her treat you like that. I am sorry I thought your love was something I could take for granted. I am sorry I was not the son you deserved." We established new boundaries, strict ones, clear ones, non-negotiable ones. I agreed to see Oliver and Sophie once every 2 weeks for a Sunday lunch, hosted exclusively at my home or at a neutral park. There would be no unscheduled babysitting, no financial transfers, no emergency pickups, no just this once exceptions, no involvement from Vanessa until she demonstrated, through consistent action over time, a genuine shift in attitude, not just words, not just apologies demanded by desperation, but real, sustained change. The first Sunday visit was quiet. The children hugged me tightly, showing me their school drawings, chattering about their new after-school program, about their teachers, about their friends, unaware of the war that had been fought over their heads. I served them homemade soup and fresh bread. I listened to their stories. I enjoyed their company deeply, fully. Without the underlying anxiety of being used, without the ticking clock of obligation. And when 5 o'clock arrived, James picked them up promptly as agreed. No lingering, no just one more hour. No guilt, no manipulation. As I watched their car drive down my street, I felt no lingering resentment, no aching emptiness, no desperate need to hold on tighter, to give more, to prove my worth through sacrifice. I felt only gratitude, gratitude that I had protected my dignity, gratitude that I had reshaped my life, gratitude that I had taught my family a lesson that no amount of money could ever buy. Love is not a service to be billed, it is a gift to be cherished. And once you put a price on it, you may find that the person who loved you most can no longer afford to stay. Ending: engage the audience. So here is where I turn this over to you. If you made it this far, thank you, truly, from the bottom of my heart, because stories like this one are hard to tell and they are even harder to live through. But I believe they need to be shared. I believe there are people out there right now, mothers, fathers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, who are being treated like an afterthought by the very people they have devoted their lives to supporting. And I need you to hear this loud and clear with every ounce of conviction I have. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to demand respect from the people who claim to love you. You are allowed to choose yourself, even when it hurts, even when it is hard, even when the guilt feels like it will swallow you whole. Love without respect is not love, it is extraction. It is consumption. It is a one-way street where you do all the driving and they do all the taking. And you deserve more than that. You deserve a relationship where your presence is celebrated, not invoiced, where your help is appreciated, not expected, where your love is returned, not exploited. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had to walk away from a family member who took you for granted? What was your breaking point? How did you find the strength to choose yourself? And if you are going through something like this right now, what is the one boundary you know you need to set but have been too afraid to draw? If this story resonated with you, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. It tells the algorithm that these stories matter, that real voices deserve to be heard, that the quiet struggles of grandparents and parents everywhere are not invisible. And if you know someone who is struggling with a similar situation, someone who is being treated like a convenience instead of a cherished member of the family, someone who is drowning in invisible labor and unacknowledged sacrifice, share this video with them. You never know who needs to hear these words today. You never know whose breaking point is one unreturned favor away. Subscribe if you want more stories about boundaries, self-respect, and the complicated, messy, beautiful reality of family dynamics. I share new stories every week, and I read every single comment. Your stories inspire me. Your courage gives me hope. Your voices remind me that I am not alone, and neither are you. And if you are going through something like this right now, if you are sitting in your own quiet house wondering if you did the right thing by saying no, let me leave you with this. You did, you absolutely did, and the peace you are fighting for, it is on the other side of that door you just closed. Keep walking, keep choosing yourself, keep believing that you are worth more than what you can provide. And remember, always remember, your love is priceless. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. Until next time, take care of each other, and take care of yourself. This is Elena signing off from Portland. Be well, be strong, be you.